Hello, glad to see you on the channel. Subscribe, give a like, and don't forget to leave a comment. Enjoy watching.
Mark, some people just aren't built for pressure. That's what Trevor Lang said to me, with that smug little grin he always wore when he thought he was being clever, the same one he probably practiced in front of a mirror back when he was still riding the high of his MBA and unlimited espresso shots. I was sitting in the stiff leather chair across from him, the exit interview form still half blank on the desk between us, and he said it like he was delivering a line from some corporate TED Talk. He leaned back like he expected applause, or at least a begrudging nod of acknowledgement. Instead, I just smiled. A tight, polite smile. The kind of smile you give someone when you're picturing them getting hit by a low-hanging pipe. To be honest, I knew this was coming long before I was officially invited to this little conversation with HR. You don't put in 22 years at a company like Barton Sterling Tech without developing a bit of spidey sense for these things. It starts small. Project scopes getting trimmed down without explanation, your calendar mysteriously clearing up week by week, someone accidentally forgetting to loop you in on client calls. Then one day, you walk into a Monday morning meeting and your latest design proposal, the one you pulled an all-nighter finishing, is being presented by someone else, someone younger, someone with innovative energy and hair that still holds gel without looking greasy. That someone was Chaiz. Yes, spelled with a Y. Chase Delacroix, age 28, career background in strategic visioning, and enough buzzwords to power an entire TEDx conference. Trevor loved him, said he brought fresh perspective. I'm pretty sure the kid once referred to a roadmap presentation as a moment of brand-forward storytelling. And I sat there, a grown man with crow's feet and 2 decades of back-end system expertise, wondering what the hell I was listening to. In the weeks leading up to my exit, I became a ghost in my own department. My workload didn't disappear. It just mutated into all the stuff no one else wanted. Legacy support tickets, disaster recovery drills, and sitting through endless security compliance webinars that felt like punishment. Trevor stopped inviting me to leadership huddles. He started reassigning my mentees. Even the department birthday cupcakes went missing from my desk in May. No card, no happy birthday Mark email. Just silence. The kind of silence that tells you the party's already over and you're the last fool still holding the piñata stick. But the kicker? The moment I knew they weren't even going to pretend anymore, that was the Friday afternoon I found my name removed from the client distribution list for Halcyon Dynamics, our biggest account. That list used to have my name at the top, back when Halcyon was just a mid-size logistics firm begging for scalable infrastructure. I built that relationship. Me. I took their network from a duct-taped mess of VPN workarounds to a fully integrated hybrid cloud system. And I did it under budget, twice. Now, suddenly, I wasn't even CC'd. So when HR booked the off-boarding appointment, I wasn't shocked. Disappointed, yes. Angry, definitely. But surprised? Not a bit. What I didn't expect was the sheer audacity of Trevor Lang sitting across from me, arms folded like some kind of benevolent executioner, acting like I was the one who'd failed. "This industry moves fast," he said, as if reciting a prayer. "Sometimes legacy talent struggles to keep pace." "Legacy talent?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Is that the new polite term for too old to trend on LinkedIn?" He laughed. God help me. He laughed like we were old drinking buddies joking about the good old days. "Don't take it personal. It's just business. You've had a good run." A good run. Like I was a retired greyhound being sent out to pasture. I thought about my daughter Emily's 6th grade science fair, the one I missed because I stayed late helping Trevor rewrite a pitch deck he'd butchered. I thought about the string of anniversaries I spent alone in hotel rooms because a client emergency couldn't wait. I thought about the 20-year plaque HR gave me that looked suspiciously like it had been recycled from someone else's drawer. And I still smiled. Not because I was okay, not because I'd found peace. I smiled because I knew something Trevor didn't. I knew the foundation they'd built without me was cracked, shallow, and full of shortcuts. and I knew it wouldn't be long before they started noticing the leaks. I stood up, buttoned my coat, left my security badge and key card on the table. "You're right, Trevor," I said, still smiling. "Some people aren't built for pressure." I walked out of that glass office, past the intern who wouldn't meet my eyes, past the framed inspirational quote about resilience in the workplace, mounted on the wall, and I didn't look back. I didn't need to. What would you do if your boss smiled while throwing you under the bus, then had the nerve to say it was for your own good? If you had told me back in 2002 that I'd give 22 years of my life to one company, I probably would have laughed, or at least rolled my eyes hard enough to pull something. But somehow, like a frog boiled slowly in water, it happened. Not all at once, but piece by piece, day by day, sacrifice by sacrifice. Barton Sterling wasn't supposed to be my forever job. It was supposed to be a stepping stone, a name to slap on a resume and bounce from when the right offer came along. But then Jane got pregnant with Emily, and our mortgage ballooned into something that could haunt your dreams. And next thing I knew, it was 2008, and quitting in the middle of a recession sounded about as smart as juggling chainsaws blindfolded. The thing is, I was good at my job. Not flashy, not loud, not one of those rock star disruptors who ran around pretending a Kanban board was a personality. I was dependable. I knew the systems. I knew the clients. I knew how to make chaos manageable. You wanted a server migration done over a weekend with zero downtime and a clean handoff? You called me. You needed someone to untangle a permissions disaster on SharePoint without losing their mind. I was your guy. I didn't need the spotlight. And I didn't care if Trevor took the credit, not at first anyway, because I believed the work would speak for itself. I believed that loyalty meant something. That if I just kept showing up and doing the job right, someone up top would take notice, maybe toss me a title bump, or at the very least, let me breathe a little. But corporate gratitude is like tap water in a drought. Promised often, delivered rarely, and when it finally arrives, it's either lukewarm or full of rust. I started noticing it a few years ago. Little things, at first. A junior analyst who I'd trained ended up leapfrogging me into a project lead role. My input on system architecture, which had always been sought out before, began getting brushed off in favor of the more modern approach, championed by whatever consultant Trevor had just read about in TechCrunch. My desk got moved, then moved again, then eventually ended up across from the copy machine, which spit out faxes from the legal team like an anxious toddler with a crayon. Then came the performance reviews, which got shorter and vaguer every year. Phrases like reliable but lacks innovation started cropping up, as if innovation meant dressing like Mark Zuckerberg and suggesting we put the company wiki on TikTok. The worst part wasn't the demotions, though. It wasn't the missed promotions or the ghosting from leadership meetings. It was the way people started looking through me, like I had become part of the furniture. I remember one meeting where I suggested a data flow improvement for Halcyon's inventory module, something I knew inside and out, something I'd iterated on for years. And Shyes, sitting across the table with his hair sculpted like a shampoo commercial, repeated my exact idea word for word 5 minutes later. Trevor beamed at him like he'd just cracked cold fusion. I was standing right there, blinking like an idiot, while the kid got praised for copying and pasting my thoughts in real time. Still, I stuck it out because I didn't know how not to. I'd built my whole identity around being the guy who could be counted on. The steady hand, the safe bet. I wore that like armor even as the company slowly chipped away at everything that made the job bearable. I kept working weekends when they asked. I missed Emily's school plays and field trips. I nodded through urgent reschedules on Friday nights. I said yes when I should have said no. I let them take my time, my energy, my focus, and in return, I got a certificate at the 20-year mark with my name misspelled. Mark Daly, not Daly. I corrected it, and the HR rep told me, "Oh, sorry, it's just a template issue." A template issue. 20 years boiled down to a template issue. Jane started noticing the toll before I did. I'd come home with a jaw clenched so tight, it gave me headaches. I stopped talking about work, because every time I opened my mouth, I felt like I was going to unload a tidal wave of bitterness. She told me once, "I miss the version of you that smiled without faking it." That one hit harder than I let on. I told her I was fine, that it was just stress, that it would pass. But deep down, I knew that whatever I had once loved about this job, the problem solving, the camaraderie, the sense of building something real, had been slowly hollowed out and replaced with shiny distractions and empty meetings. When the pink slip came, dressed up in corporate HR speak and sugar-coated with buzzwords like restructuring and organizational pivot, I didn't fight it. I didn't beg. I didn't even raise my voice. I just nodded, collected my things, and walked out. But the humiliation lingered. The shame of having given everything only to be discarded like expired software made me question everything: my age, my relevance, my place in the world. I wasn't ready to retire, but the job market didn't care. Every interview I landed felt like a setup. Half of them seemed confused why a guy my age was even applying. One recruiter, a girl who probably still had textbooks on her desk, told me, "You have a strong foundation, but we're looking for someone a bit more forward-leaning." I asked her if that meant younger. She laughed nervously and changed the subject. After a while, I stopped applying altogether. I told myself I was regrouping, but really, I was hiding. From the rejection, from the loss of identity, from the echo in the house now that I had nowhere to be every morning. I wasn't just unemployed. I was untethered, adrift. And worst of all, I wasn't even angry yet. That would come later, when I realized just how much they'd taken and how little they'd left behind. About 3 weeks after I walked out of Barton Sterling with my last box of cubicle relics, a cracked mug, a framed picture of Emily from when she still wore braces, and a stack of manuals no one had touched since Windows 7. I hit what I guess you could call the stagnation phase. It wasn't depression in the textbook sense, but more like a fog, slow and thick, that rolled in around my routine and refused to leave. Every morning I'd get up at the same time, shave, put on a button-down shirt out of sheer habit, and then just sit. The laptop stayed shut most days. The job boards blurred together. After about 24 applications and half as many canned rejection emails, I started keeping a mental list of which companies ghosted me the fastest. Spoiler, the fintech startups with names like Zenth or Climb were the champions of radio silence. Jane tried to stay upbeat, bless her, but I could see the worry creep in around her eyes. She started asking little questions. Not outright panic, but subtle things like, "Have you heard back from that one in Fairfax? Or did you follow up with that recruiter who called on Tuesday?" I'd lie sometimes, not to be cruel, just to keep things steady. I'd tell her, "They said they're still reviewing applications," even when I knew they weren't. And Emily, she was sweet, but I could feel the awkwardness in her voice when she asked, "So, are you retired now?" I said no, I was just pivoting, exploring new avenues. Words I'd once rolled my eyes at during staff meetings became lifelines I clung to. It was on a Thursday, the kind of gray-skied, middle-of-the-month day where time just melts, that I almost skipped the networking mixer. It was hosted by some local business council at a hotel downtown, the kind with chairs too small for adults and hors d'oeuvres served on napkins that dissolve if you look at them too hard. I didn't want to go. I hated those things even when I had a job. Now, showing up as a freelancer in transition felt about as dignified as showing up to a high school reunion wearing a sandwich board that said, "I peaked in 2011. But something made me go. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe it was stubborn pride. Maybe it was Jane's voice in the back of my head saying, "You're not done, Mark." So I went. I ironed a clean shirt, showed up 15 minutes late, and tried not to sweat through my collar. For the first hour, it was everything I feared: awkward introductions, lukewarm wine, and 20-somethings tossing acronyms around like candy. Then I spotted a familiar face by the bar: Samantha Hart, VP of Operations at Halcyon Dynamics, the same company whose infrastructure I'd built from the ground up, the same account Trevor now bragged about as his crown jewel. Samantha and I had always gotten along. We weren't friends, not in the out for beers sense, but we'd sat in the trenches together during more than one system rollout. And there's a certain kind of respect that comes from sweating through a week-long migration with someone at 2 in the morning. She recognized me instantly, smiled, and within minutes we were trading stories, most of them about how ridiculous everything in tech had gotten since innovation started, meaning throw out whatever works. She was the one who brought it up, casually, like someone testing the water. You know, our current vendor's been slipping. I kept my expression neutral, even as my heart thumped like I'd just found a buried switchblade in the sandbox. She went on. Missed deadlines, bloated estimates, junior engineers showing up to strategy meetings with no clue what they were even supporting. She didn't name Barton Sterling, but she didn't need to. I knew the tone. I'd heard it from her before, usually when she was preparing to fire someone. I played it cool, asked a few questions, dropped a few well-timed chuckles, and mostly let her vent. Then I made one small, deliberate move. I said, "You know, I've been doing a bit of independent consulting lately. If you ever need someone to take a fresh look, maybe clean up some of that legacy mess, I've still got my notes from the original deployment." She paused. Not long, but long enough. Then she said, "Send me something. Outline. Rate sheet. Let's see what you've got." I went home that night more alert than I'd felt in weeks. I didn't sleep. I didn't need to. The fog had lifted. I stayed up building a proposal, not some bloated PowerPoint monstrosity, but a real plan, tailored to Halcyon's pain points with actual solutions. I knew what they needed because I'd once built it from scratch. I knew which servers were due for replacement, which processes were wasting time, which middle managers were playing hot potato with tickets they didn't understand. I didn't need a team or an agency. I needed a laptop, an NDA, and a green light. I titled the document Clean Slate, Infrastructure Optimization Proposal, and sent it to Samantha the next morning with a brief email. Thought this might align better with your current frustrations. Happy to walk you through it. Her reply came by lunch. Let's talk Monday. No fluff, no delay. That weekend I dug into my archives. Every document I'd ever saved, every diagram, every workaround I'd documented, but never formally submitted. My brain clicked into a gear I thought I'd lost, the old confident rhythm of someone who knows they're about to take something back that was stolen. By Monday, I was ready, not just for the pitch, for the fight. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just working to survive. I was working to make someone sweat. It was the middle of the following week, sometime around Wednesday afternoon, when my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in over a month, but one I knew down to the last digit. I almost let it go to voicemail out of instinct, not because I was avoiding anything, but because I had just finished a call with Halcyon's CFO about load balancing issues on their warehouse networks, and my head was still knee-deep in deployment planning. I was in the zone, that rare headspace where your mind moves faster than your hands, and everything clicks into place without you having to force it. But when I saw the caller ID, Lang T, I let it ring once more, then picked up with a deliberate calm. Not chipper, not cold, just neutral. The kind of tone you use when you're expecting a favor to be asked, but already know your answer. "Hey Mark, how's everything going?" Trevor's voice was coated in the kind of artificial warmth you only hear in sales calls and apology voicemails. There was an edge underneath it, though, a tightness in his throat, like he was trying to laugh off something but couldn't quite make it stick. It was the first time I'd heard his voice since that humiliating exit interview, and hearing it now, I realized how differently it landed when the power dynamic had shifted. I told him things were going well, which was true in the kind of satisfying way you don't have to embellish. I didn't offer details. I didn't need to. The silence that followed told me he already knew. In fact, I could picture him pacing in his office, or more likely a downsized cube in a repurposed wing, staring at a dashboard filled with red alerts and watching Halcyon's billables drop off a cliff. Because while I hadn't taken the whole account, I'd taken the part that mattered, the core infrastructure work, the part that kept the entire logistics stack humming. And that wasn't something Barton Sterling could fake their way through with a fresh coat of UI and some junior consultants in logo hoodies. Trevor cleared his throat and said something about just wanting to check in, which was already laughable. Then he dropped the pretense. "Listen," he said, "we've been hearing some things. Halcyon mentioned they were working with a new contractor, and, well, your name came up. We're wondering if there's a way we could maybe bring you back in. On a limited basis, of course. Consultant status, flexible hours. Just to smooth over the transition." I wish I could say I launched into a righteous tirade, told him off in grand fashion, or hung up with a flourish. But that's not what I did. Instead, I paused. Not for effect, but because I wanted to let him sit in it, to let the reality of the situation settle in his gut like a bad sandwich. Then I said, in the most measured tone I could manage, "That's very generous, Trevor, but I'm afraid I've already committed to Halcyon on a longer-term contract. They needed someone who could handle the pressure." I heard it. That moment, that beat of stunned silence where he knew exactly what I was doing. The echo of his own words, the ones he had tossed so casually across the table in my exit interview, now coming back to him with surgical precision. There was a soft exhale, not quite a sigh, more like the sound someone makes when they realize they've stepped in something and there's no clean way out of it. Then came the attempts to soften it. "No hard feelings," he said. "This is just business, right? We all make moves." I agreed. Exactly, just business. He tried once more, almost as an afterthought. "If things change, maybe down the line, we'd love to find a way to work together again." I thanked him, wished him well, and ended the call before he could say anything else. Then I sat back in my chair and let the moment wash over me. Not joy, not gloating, just something heavier, something sharper. The kind of satisfaction that doesn't make you jump for joy, but makes you breathe a little deeper, like the air is finally your own again. That afternoon, I had a call with Samantha to go over some expansion plans. She was happy, not just with the results, but with how simple everything had become. "I didn't realize how much fluff we were paying for," she said, half amused, half annoyed. I told her it wasn't uncommon, that big firms often sell process where they should be selling outcomes, that clients rarely know the difference until someone shows them how clean it can be when you cut out the noise. She asked me if I'd consider scaling up, maybe even building a small team. I told her I was thinking about it. In truth, I was already pulling together names of a few ex-colleagues who had either left Barton Sterling on their own terms or been quietly sidelined the way I had. The idea of building something small, nimble, and competent, a team focused on doing good work without politics, without ego, started to sound less like a dream and more like a blueprint. That night, over dinner, Jane asked me why I was smiling into my mashed potatoes like a lunatic. I just said, "Trevor called," and she laughed, not asking for details, because the look on my face told her everything she needed to know. Later, as I was cleaning up my inbox, I saw a calendar invite from Halcyon for a strategic planning session scheduled for next quarter. It was addressed directly to me, not to an agency, not to a vendor, but to Mark Daly, lead consultant. For a moment, I stared at that subject line, letting the weight of it land. This wasn't just a job. It was a name, my name, front and center. After 2 decades of watching someone else slap their initials on my work, I finally had something that was mine. And it only cost me everything I thought I needed. By the time fall rolled around and the leaves outside my home office window turned the color of burnt amber, I had started to remember what it felt like to wake up in the morning without dread pressing down on my chest like a cinder block. The house, once filled with the quiet hum of resignation and doubt, now buzzed with purpose. Not the kind of manufactured urgency you get from 10 unread Slack messages before your first coffee, but the kind of clarity that comes from finally doing work that matters, on your own terms, without someone breathing down your neck, trying to turn your sweat into their bonus. My calendar was full again, but not bloated. I wasn't chasing meetings just to prove I was cross-functional. I was solving real problems for clients who actually wanted solutions, not song and dance routines wrapped in corporate theater. My little consultancy, still nameless, still unofficial, was doing just fine. I had Halcyon, which turned out to be the gift that kept on giving. Once we cleaned up their infrastructure and got their internal processes humming, they brought me in on logistics expansion plans, system upgrades, even vendor evaluations. And because Samantha wasn't shy about sharing results with her network, word got out. One client turned into three. A logistics partner based in Chicago reached out, and then another in the Midwest asked if I'd review their disaster recovery plan. I wasn't building an empire, but I was building something, and for the first time in years, I felt like a person again, not just a title on a door or a name buried in an org chart. The real kicker came one Friday afternoon, completely out of the blue. I was sorting through some old digital files, trying to clear out clutter and finally organize my archives like I'd been promising myself since I left Barton Sterling. I was knee-deep in folders labeled things like Final Reautumn, Really Final, and Client Deck Read 03 when I found a zip file I didn't recognize. It was dated nearly a year before my exit. The name was generic, 2023 Perf Reviews a Draft. But when I opened it, I found something that made me stop cold. There it was, a glowing performance review written by Trevor himself, for me, in his own clipped but unmistakable language. Phrases like, critical to halcyon retention, team's most reliable architect, and indispensable for continuity planning, leapt off the screen. The document was marked draft, not submitted, which meant it never saw the light of day. He had written it, probably meant to use it as leverage for his own promotion, and then shelved it the minute the company decided to pivot toward the shiny new toys with half my experience and double my LinkedIn followers. I stared at that file for a long time, not sure whether I wanted to laugh or throw my laptop out the window. All the months I spent thinking I was slipping, fading, becoming obsolete, and all along the man who kicked me out had known damn well that I was the one holding the place together. It was a strange kind of vindication. Quiet, private. Nobody else would ever see it, but I didn't need them to. I emailed it to myself anyway. Not for revenge, not for leverage, just to have it. Proof that I hadn't imagined my value. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Around the same time, I started hearing through the grapevine that things at Barton Sterling weren't going so well. A former colleague, someone I trusted, reached out under the guise of catching up, but it didn't take long before the truth came out. Halcyon had quietly pulled more contracts, citing alignment issues. Several longtime clients had followed suit, and the consulting arm that Trevor had been championing was now on the chopping block after 2 failed quarters. Word was Trevor had been reassigned to internal strategy initiatives, which anyone with a passing knowledge of corporate spin could translate into exiled without a title. There was even talk that his pet project, the Innovation Lab, had been absorbed by another division, with its staff quietly let go or reassigned. I didn't gloat, not because I'm noble, but because by then it didn't feel necessary. There's a point where justice no longer needs to be shouted. When you know, and they know, and the silence between those 2 points says everything. Emily graduated that fall, and for once I didn't miss the ceremony. I sat in the front row with Jane, both of us beaming like idiots as our daughter walked across the stage in her cap and gown. I was there, not on a call, not trapped in a hotel room with 3 PowerPoint decks to revise. I was there in every sense that mattered. Afterward, when we took pictures and laughed and ate too much cake, I looked around at my family and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness exactly, because the last year had taken its toll, and I still carried some of that bitterness in the quiet moments. But peace, nonetheless. Like I'd stepped off a treadmill that had been dragging me face first for over a decade, and finally found my footing. Some nights, when the house is quiet and I'm the last one awake, I still think about that office, the cold lighting, the whiteboard cluttered with half-finished flowcharts, the worn carpet under my desk that had molded to the shape of my chair. I think about the version of myself who sat there day after day, slowly fading into irrelevance, while convincing himself it was all part of the process. I feel sorry for that guy, not because he wasn't good enough, but because he believed that being good was enough. Because he didn't realize that in a system designed to chew up loyalty and reward flash over substance, waiting your turn just means standing still while the ground disappears beneath you. But I also think about what came after. The pitch I almost didn't send, the call I almost didn't take, the future I nearly missed because I was too angry, too ashamed, too lost to believe there might still be a way forward. Maybe I didn't win. Not in the traditional sense. I didn't become a tech mogul or buy a Tesla or get a profile in Forbes, but I reclaimed something far more valuable: my time, my purpose, my dignity. And as for Trevor, last I heard he was still with the company, though no one quite knew what he actually did anymore. Some people said he was consulting internally, others said he was just biding time until the severance package kicked in. I didn't care. I didn't follow up. I had work to do. I had my name back, and that was more than enough.